testing out this stream downstairs, so we'll see how it goes. We shall see how it goes. I gotta change my input here. Okay. So I'm gonna review this Wall Street Journal article about FTX.
Over $150 billion. In 3 days, that's how much the world's 15 largest cryptocurrencies lost market value. It's because of the crypto exchange platform FTX, which is behind this.
So I wanted to look up and just see how much that is, like relative to national GDPs. So the country of Greece has approximately, it's like 200 billion, roughly. So that's almost the entire market value of a year of GDP of Greece. And like Iraq and Turkey are relatively close to that. So those entire countries' GDP is how much was lost.
This token, named FTT. On November 6th, the token's value began to fall, losing more than 80% of its worth in the span of 72 hours. Once seen as a survivor in a struggling market, the fall of FTX has sent shockwaves through the cryptocurrency industry. So, what went wrong? FTX is the brainchild of Sam Bankman-Fried. He's commonly known as SBF on social media. He's been previously hailed as a savior of the crypto industry.
And you were called the JP Morgan of crypto.
Yep.
Did that bother you or did not?
It doesn't bother me too much.
Bankman-Fried founded the quantitative trading firm Alameda Research in 2017. 2 years later, he started FTX, an exchange platform for buying or selling cryptocurrencies. Right now, he's the majority owner of both firms.
That kind of aroused some skepticism among industry players and traders, investors, stakeholders that there could be some sort of conflict of interest in terms of whether Alameda Research was getting preferential treatment on FTX, vice versa. But the official narrative that SBF gave in the past is that the two companies are separate entities.
After its launch, FTX attracted major investments from Silicon Valley and Wall Street.
We'd raised a few $1 billion over the course of the last couple of years, and we're a profitable business.
It grew into the fourth largest cryptocurrency exchange for derivatives trading. Celebrities promoted the platform in ads.
I'm getting into crypto.
With FTX. You in?
It's FTX. It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto.
I don't think so.
FTX was gaining steam, and in the process, often tussled with Binance, the world's largest crypto exchange by volume.
When FTX was getting started, Binance invested in FTX, and it was one of the crypto exchange's earliest investors. But FTX, as we know, grew really rapidly and became a very substantial rival to Binance.
As FTX grew in the industry, Bankman-Fried furthered his reputation as a crypto savior when digital asset prices collapsed earlier this year.
It's not fair to customers.
He bailed out firms, spending about $1 billion.
It's okay to do a deal that is moderately bad in bailing out a place.
But that image didn't last. On November 2nd, CoinDesk published a report based on a leaked Alameda balance sheet. According to the leaked data, Alameda claimed it had over $14 billion in assets at the end of June, but most of that was FTX's tokens. Alameda CEO Caroline Ellison tweeted that the balance sheet wasn't complete.
Caroline also said its financial situation is under control, the company is doing well. However, it seems like the market just...
So, right off the bat, a couple of things here. Number one is you have a crypto exchange, which is ostensibly dealing in something. I mean, its entire purpose is to deal in something that, like in the case of Bitcoin, is supposed to be decentralized. So you have a centralizing agency that is allowing people to enter into a market that's supposed to be decentralized. So you have centralization without much meaningful regulation. You also have an individual that has two companies, an owner-operator as identified, where people raised questions that there could be an explicit conflict of interest. So you have someone who, when you're the head of a company, you have to wear multiple hats, and you have what's known as a fiduciary duty, right? So if you have investors, you have stockholders in a company, you have a fiduciary duty. And fiduciary comes from fidelis, like the word fidelity, right? You have to be faithful. And so you have to be able to make difficult decisions that maybe aren't in your own personal best interest, but are going to act in the best interest of a company. And so when you have two companies that have the potential to have conflicts with each other, it's very difficult to do those two things simultaneously.
Didn't really buy that, and then traders continue to withdraw from FTX.
FTX and Alameda did not respond to a request for comment. Things escalated on November 6th when Binance said it would offload hundreds of millions of dollars of FTT. Binance did not respond to a request for comment. The announcement sparked mass withdrawals. That day, FTX processed $4 billion of transactions, many times the normal amount for a day. Some got backlogged, which sparked demand for more. By November 7th, that number ballooned to $6 billion. On the 8th, a day later, FTX's finances were in crisis. Binance stepped in and said it would buy the company. It seemed like FTX might have solved its liquidity problem, but
So this is essentially what you have when you have a run on banks, right? Like, this is almost part and parcel for what happened during banks in, when you had the bank runs after the Great Crash in 1929, right? So you have individuals that want to take their money out of the bank, right? They're worried that the local bank is going to run out of cash deposits, that they're going to run out of money, and that they're not going to have access to their money. So it becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where some people start taking it out, and that emboldens other people to want to take out more, and they just keep taking out. And that is ultimately, how these things become self-reinforcing.
But on the 9th, Binance backed out of the non-binding acquisition. The next day, the Journal reported that FTX used money from customers to fund risky bets.
So let's talk about the contract there. So you have, in contract laws, you have offers, acceptance, consideration. And generally speaking, anything over $500 usually has to be in writing for it to be binding. So here maybe they are in preliminary discussions, and even if they make public that they're thinking about purchasing, then they've just made an offer to purchase. An offer to purchase in and of itself is not necessarily enforceable. And here, clearly, the deal falls apart.
Bets made by Alameda.
It's a shocking revelation for a lot of people in the industry, because even though there has been a lot of speculation about FTX and Alameda Research being joined at the hip, nobody could have foreseen that SBF was willing to transfer billions of customer funds at his crypto exchange to help his crypto trading firm.
The Securities and Exchange Commission and Justice Department are investigating FTX, according to a person familiar with the matter.
This is not like the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. They take people's money, they borrow against it, it's not much disclosure, and then they trade.
Okay, so this is Gary Gensler, and Gary Gensler currently works for the SEC dealing with crypto, but he used to be, I've actually taken his online course for cryptocurrency. So he taught a cryptocurrency class for MIT, which is available online. It's actually a really great class. It will give you tons of reading material if you wanted to get super into cryptocurrencies. I think despite all of kind of the craziness that's going on with the market, there are certain things in crypto that will probably stick around, but it's definitely a bad time for most people who invested.
Against their customers.
A spokesperson for the Justice Department declined to comment. Bankman-Fried told investors that FTX couldn't cover withdrawals since its collateral was dropping in value and couldn't be liquidated, according to people familiar with the matter. On the 11th, Bankman-Fried resigned as CEO and FTX and Alameda filed for bankruptcy. Afterwards, FTX said it was probing a potential hack. More than $370 million worth of crypto funds appeared to be missing, according to crypto analytics firm Elliptic. On the 12th, the Journal reported that Alameda and FTX executives knew that FTX had lent its customers money to Alameda.
So a lot of retail traders and investors I've talked to are feeling desperate or frustrated. The majority of the people in the industry could not have seen this coming because FTX is such a dominant player.
The fallout has led other companies to tout their reserves and call for more transparency in the industry. As of November 11th, according to the bankruptcy filing, FTX's estimation of their liabilities would make it the largest crypto-related bankruptcy ever filed.
Joe Hogan. Tech monopolies. Let's see.
This was the scene 6 months ago in the Bahamas. That person in shorts is, of course, FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried, otherwise known as SBF. He's seen here with Bahamian Prime Minister Philip Davis, breaking ground at the site set for FTX's global headquarters.
The arrival and presence of FTX underscores the readiness of the Bahamas to be a home for global leaders in the crypto space.
But now, that land sits empty. The celebrated project, abandoned. So what made the Bahamas so appealing to FTX in the first place? And what will happen to the nation's crypto hub status now that its biggest player has collapsed?
The relationship between FTX and the Bahamas has, it's been interesting to watch.
WSJ's Angel Au Young went to Nassau to cover the fall of FTX.
Obviously, the Bahamian government wanted companies like FTX to come to the Bahamas.
And so it went about courting these companies. It was the first to issue its national currency in digital form.
Sand dollar, the digital Bahamian dollar.
It hosted a crypto conference presented by FTX.
Welcome to the Bahamas.
But most importantly, it enacted a comprehensive legal framework for digital assets like cryptocurrency.
The Bahamas is a couple steps ahead than the US of trying to create a regulatory environment for the industry. And that really boils down to the DARE Act that was passed in the end of 2020.
The Digital Assets and Registered Exchanges Act, or DARE, is intended to give firms like FTX clear rules to adhere to.
Before a company, especially that's going to be a digital exchange, puts its headquarters in a country, it wants to have certainty about how that country is classifying all these different products.
That's attorney Bruce Zagaris, who's worked on Caribbean financial services matters and international white-collar crime.
Really, I take that to mean they're really worried about what are going to be the tax implications if people make exchanges and withdrawals in that specific country.
The DARE framework he's talking about doesn't yet exist in the US, but regulation is something SBF has called for.
The fact that FTX wanted to make their headquarters in the Bahamas, it gave legitimacy to the DARE Act, and the DARE Act gave legitimacy to FTX.
However, having regulations and enforcing them are two different things. The Financial Action Task Force, a global financial watchdog, has previously put the Bahamas on its so-called gray list for increased monitoring. The country was only delisted 2 years ago.
The Bahamas regulatory regime is not as harsh. And so most likely FTX was hoping, or maybe even expecting, that the Bahamas would not harshly implement its DARE Act.
Both FTX and the Securities Commission of the Bahamas did not respond to requests for comment. There's also how the country deals with taxes. Last month, the European Union added the Bahamas to its tax haven blacklist, which identifies jurisdictions that don't yet comply with all international tax standards. The country doesn't charge personal, capital gains, estate gift, or inheritance taxes. It also doesn't have corporate tax, unless that revenue is derived from within the Bahamas.
The US is known for having high personal income taxes, no matter where you live.
that's a relative statement. That's a relative statement as far as what your personal income tax is going to be. The effective tax rate for individuals who are in the lower and middle class is extraordinarily high, but corporate tax rates are extraordinarily low. Even if on the books they, one of the claims is that they're listed as the highest, but you have to look to the effective tax rate is the tax rate that is both relative to your pay and income versus your final tax percentage, and the impact of the taxes that you actually pay. So we could have a 99% corporate tax rate, but if no one actually pays that, it doesn't mean anything to say America has the highest corporate tax rate of any corporate tax in the world. So I've heard that many times, and there's lots of studies that show that the United States, in fact, does not have the highest effective tax rates for particularly the rich. We have one of the lowest effective tax rates for corporations, large corporations, because they're able to take massive deductions and write-offs through the tax code.
You can move to some states.
But that being said, that right there, that Bahama, no capital gains, no personal tax, all of that, yeah, you can see why the international community is not super happy with that. That's what makes international law troubling and difficult, because it's quasi anarchy, right? There are things like the international criminal courts, but there's not a lot of jurisdictions in which international community can actually force the Bahamas to do anything.
And you might have a lower income tax rate, but nothing beats the Bahamas. So I can see why the Bahamas is a particularly attractive option to somebody like SBF, who has publicly stated that he wants to make as much personal money as possible to give back to various causes.
Another thing the Bahamas has going for it, it's really close to the US, just about an hour flight to Miami.
It's very helpful if you're a company like FTX and you want to attract US business and you want to do business in the US, but yet you don't want to be subject to all the regulation and the tax regime.
Fly about 2 hours further north, and there's DC. SBF has become something of a regular on Capitol Hill over the last year, even testifying before the Senate on crypto regulation.
The industry has the potential to improve a lot of people's lives.
But now, with FTX's collapse, the decision to headquarter in the Bahamas is complicating its bankruptcy. FTX's new leadership is at odds with the country's regulators over who has control over billions in customer assets.
Is it going to be the Bahamian authorities who have control of these assets for the liquidation process, or will the SEC be involved? There are still really big questions on who's going to be responsible for holding FTX accountable.
It's unclear yet how severely FTX's collapse will affect the Bahamas, but experts expect that it will harm the country and its reputation as a crypto hub.
The fact that they've attracted the number 3 digital exchange and that it quickly went from success to bankruptcy has jeopardized the new product and the new innovation that the Bahamas has.
Okay, so that I think is accurate, that it's definitely going to hurt them. How could it not? But what they're describing here is, in Latin, we would say cum hoc ergo propter hoc, just the logical fallacy, and essentially says after the fact, therefore because of the fact. So, yeah, I mean, they moved there and it collapsed, but them moving there I don't think is necessarily causal to them collapsing. Perhaps it's indicative of the type of business practices that they were engaged in that would lead a company to want to go to the Bahamas to try and do, maybe more underhanded things.
Undertaken, unfortunately.
FTX's collapse will likely force the Bahamas and other governments to look more closely at the crypto industry.
For years now, every government has known that this is an issue that is not going to go away. But with this collapse, now that billions upon billions of customers' money has been lost, it's going to force these governments to enact an accountability framework much faster than they might have been willing to do previously.
As for SBF, it remains to be seen what action, if any, the Bahamas might take against him.
So yeah, I mean, I've seen all kinds of reporting all over the internet talking about kind of the crazy things going on. And yeah, I mean, if you engage in double dealing and have an explicit conflict of interest, people should be very cautious entering into business deals with someone in this manner. So if you guys are interested in more coverage on cryptocurrency things, let me know.